Does this sound like you? You have a boss who's changing direction every 20 seconds. They have bosses who are asking you to innovate, and you're just trying to get it done. I know we're all a tad overwhelmed, which is why we have this show this week, which is the Fairy Godmother's Guide to Surviving Turbulent Times. We're going to learn from Cinderella. You're going to learn how I navigate it. And teaser, we have a special guest, a friend of mine who's going to come in and talk about how she manages the crazy. So tune in, learn more about how to maybe be a little bit of a Cinderella or Cinderella, whatever your option, and navigate through crazy times at work. Everybody, thanks for coming to the show where we are going to talk about whether you're going to channel your inner Cinderella or if you are going to take another path. Super excited to share this week that we have a special guest who will be adding to the conversation this week. Annie, wave to your awesome audience here. I will be introducing her a little later in the show. So just as a reminder, for those of you that are new, we will be covering the topic in the first half hour of the session. Then we are going to go into magic time, talk about ideas and tools that you can use, and then we'll be stopping the recording and saying goodbye to those of you who are out in YouTube land and doing private Q&A with those who have decided to stay. So do remember, you have to be present to win one of the one-on-one sessions that we give away at every show. And yes, we will be private with what we are recording after the show. So if you are watching this on YouTube and want to ask any questions and participate, be like Dawn, who shows up in fabulous colored hairs. We missed you last week, Dawn. It's nice to see you again. Also nice to see some other familiar faces. But be like Dawn and come to the show, and then you can ask any questions you want in the back half. So, what are we talking about today? Well, this week, I wanted to talk about kind of the crazy. Let's be real about it. I am known, as always, for having a phrase when it comes to what I call the crazy, which is, that moment when you're lying on the floor crying so hard that crap is coming out of your nose. Those are the moments to pay attention to, because those are the moments where the current state has gotten so bad that you're like, something here has to change. And when you think about all of the weirdness of 2020 and where we are moving into 2021, and the overwhelming conversation is, I'm not sure people are lying on the floor crying so hard that stuff is coming out of their nose, but kind of the current state, not so much. And I hear a lot of heads coming up off desks and a lot of people going, hold on a second. How do I think about the next step? How do I have tools to help me navigate that? Because either I'm exhausted, I am a little bit scared, I'm a little bit done, or a little bit something else. And how do you think through all of those sorts of things? And so I'm going to share certainly some of the tools that I use to navigate when things are ambiguous, when you're not entirely sure what the right path is, where you're a bit burned out by the current state, on helping you figure through either how to manage your current state or how to create a whole new one yourself. And I come back, and if you are new to my world, I do like to talk about Cinderella. I come back to the story of Cinderella, and what I think is fascinating about her situation and what happened is, let's be real. Her situation prior to the fairy godmother showing up was not awesome. She had a fairly irrational boss who changed direction, changed expectation, minimized resources, did all of that sort of stuff, kind of at a moment's notice. And she had two colleagues who seemed to really only be looking out for themselves, who weren't really good into collaboration, who decided that really they could toss all of the work over to Cinderella on a regular basis. And she went from being a family member to somebody who was sitting in the ashes. And when I think about that scenario, it feels weirdly a little like looking in the mirror sometimes, right? Because you're like, hold on a second. My bosses, and I don't think they're doing this intentionally to say the stepmother did, but my bosses are changing direction every 25 seconds. Um, my manager is sounding a little bit irrational. It might not even be your boss. It might be, I don't know, the leadership of the company who are saying, oh, we need to pivot and reinvent and all of those sorts of things. And for those of us who are on the front line or who are just trying to get through all of the weirdness that is happening, that can be incredibly exhausting. And so I say in that situation, take a page out of Cinderella's book. Like she absolutely went, y'all crazy, and I am going to control what I can control. She also didn't, the other thing she did is she didn't actually pass along a lot of her angst and her drama to anybody else. If you'll remember, she had the mice and the birds and other characters to play with, and she was all like, y'all are awesome too, and we are just going to figure this out together. I think that's such a fantastic example of leadership. And what she could control, she did. And what she couldn't, she didn't. And in her situation, she was like, the current state is untenable, and I'm going to figure out a new path to manifest my ambitions. And when she met somebody who could help her, aka the fairy godmother, she took all of that advice and said, yeah, okay, this is what I want to do. And so while I certainly didn't have that in the past, I would absolutely just remind you to tap into your inner Cinderella a tiny bit when you are feeling frustrated or not sure, and start looking out there for your personal fairy godmothers. And for those of you that have been to the show before, you will know that we did a previous show, and Kelly, who is watching, is going to drop a link to it in the chat for those of you that haven't seen it before, but about what I also think is the power of building what I call your selfish squad, which is a bunch of different people who are equally curious about the future you and also ambitious for the future you. Because I'll tell you, doing this alone on a professional basis, we have a lot of friends and family who can help us through personal things, but having a group of people around you who are excited for your future professionally and who are selfishly ambitious for you can be the armor, the padded room, the whatever resource that you need to help you navigate through. And you all are going to meet one of mine. Annie, who is here today, is actually one of my selfish squad. She was actually part of the group that came up with the slightly crazy name to call it that. And we're going to talk about that too. The last thing I do, which I want to share with everybody, is actually the tool that I've used to help when the crazy happens. And what I mean by that is I know that a couple of things are probably happening. My guess is your bosses or your managers are saying, well, I need you to do this extra thing, and I need you to do this other extra thing, and I need you to do this other extra thing. And at the same time, you have kids, pets, family members, just trying to keep your Wi-Fi going, all sorts of other factors happening. And the get shit done list is just getting bigger and bigger. And at the same time, they're limiting resources, a little like the stepmother did. And in those scenarios, learning how to have a conversation around priorities and resources with your boss is one of the most powerful things you can do. And so years ago, when I was scaling organizations for really fast growing companies, we created a shorthand language for myself and for my management team around what we call now, near, and future time. Because here's the thing, your bosses, your managers, your leadership team will continue to ask you until you say no, until you come back and say, look, the tank is full. And how do you have that conversation without either coming back and saying, I need to explode, I've got too much on my plate? How do you have the priorities conversation? Or how do you get more resources in less of a, I can't get it all done, I'm a failure conversation, and more in a strategy conversation is key. So let me introduce you to what I call now, near, and future time. And of course, I have show and tell that I want to bring up, which isn't quite ready. And here we are. Share screen. Okay. So what is now, near, and future time? So let me talk about it first. So now time is the work that you are doing to get the things done that you need to do each week. So right now, your now time is spending, an hour with me on a Friday lunchtime, afternoon, wherever you are watching and listening. But you are investing now time in this. Now time is every week I have to write an article. I thoroughly enjoy it. I write an article for an upcoming newsletter that we drop every week. Now time is doing my bookkeeping and accounting and managing all of my customers. Now time is the work that is needed to get done today because it needs to get done today. So I think we can all agree, we all get what now time is. Near time, however, is time that you are spending planning, ideating, strategizing, thinking about how do you prepare for a now event in the future. So as an example, if like event planning is a really great example of this, or if you've got a meeting coming up that you need to prepare for, or you need to create a report to deliver on some analytics, this is what I call near time. So the impact of what it is you're doing during your near time is probably anywhere from 3 to 6 months out on your calendar. And then I also talk about future time. And future time is time that you are spending either educating yourself about what is happening in the marketplace, doing research and development around strategies and ideas, personal development, thinking about how do you start to build the vision around how can you and your team and your work be better. So how does this work? So as an example, if you were to talk to the CEO of a public company, as an example, and you said, how much time are you spending in the now versus the near versus the future, based on their 40-hour week, my guess is they probably or should be spending 85 to 90% of their time in future, probably about, well, let's figure out the math, but probably 10, maybe 5% on the near, and as little as possible on the now. But you think about what is the impact of the CEO and what is their job at the end of the day, it should be really focused out in the future. I also want to give you a real example because I had a very brilliant, very talented, very strategic thinking team member when I was at Pandora. And he was a director in the organization and was thinking like a VP, but was not acting like a VP, and was looking for the promotion up to VP level. And I said, I need you to act like a VP as opposed to just think like a VP. And he was like, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, let's talk about your numbers. I said, how much time, if you look at your week, are you spending in the now versus the near versus the future? And I will never forget his answer because it made me laugh. And he said, Joanna, I spend 98% of the time in the now, 2% about in the near, and I think about the future in the shower. And I paused for just a second and I said, that actually makes me angry. And he was like, why? Like, why is this a problem? And I said, of all of the people in the organization who has a strategic vision and has the tools and the ability to actually help us deliver on our strategy as a company, you are it. And you are telling me that you are spending all of your time fighting fires and dealing with now issues, as opposed to thinking what we should be doing 2 to 3 years out as a company. And as somebody who could actually move the bottom line for the company and actually help us hit our revenue goals, you have an outsized impact in that area. And so in reality, if I was running the company, I'd want you to be closer to, 98 and 2. And so we are at opposite ends of the spectrum. Now, obviously, we couldn't change those numbers around overnight, but it helped him rethink how he managed his time and how he messaged to both the people reporting into him and to his colleagues, and then back to me, how he shifted. And his numbers did shift over time. And all of a sudden, surprise, surprise, the executives in the team who were my peers and my bosses started to notice. And not only did they recognize that he was strategically thinking about the future, but he was acting that way too. And he started getting invited into board meetings and got the promotion and all of the good sort of things. And I'm excited to say he has manifested all that I had hoped for him. And I come back to what I share with you all on a regular basis. You are teaching people who you are at every single engagement. And if you are just teaching the now you are actually exacerbating the problem of people are going to give you stuff to do, because if you are known as a get shit done person, they will give you shit to do. Or are you messaging that future? So how do you start thinking about, how many of you, real quick, I just want to see a show of hands. How many of you are the 98 to 0 character in your workplace, or a version, something like that on your day-to-day basis? I hope I'm kind of a crazily not. Who wants to throw out? So Dawn, what would you say your numbers are?
Oh, I don't know.
Take a stab. There's not an incorrect answer here.
Probably 90-10.
90-10-0?
Yeah.
And what do you think they should be?
I think I need to be focusing much more on that future conversation. So any increase there would be good.
Okay, so where are you going to go down to 80-10-10, or are we going to try and move it even further?
I want to move it further.
Okay, to what? Put a number down.
All right, how about 70 is future, at the end. So 70, 10, 20.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. I'm now going to teach you how to have this conversation with your boss, because this is the person, if you think about who's feeding stuff in and who can actually help you, this is the person that can help you with this. You can absolutely, and let me pop over here, build this graphic out. So what do you think your numbers should be? And I would actually leave your manager's estimate blank in when you're sharing it. And then what is the reality? So coming in your next one-on-one, and Dawn, we're going to say, let's actually do this really quickly. Whoops. Oh, it's not going to let me change. So I did the 98-0. And your numbers were a little bit different, but what is the reality? What is your estimate? The first conversation you want to have with your manager is introducing the idea of now, near, and future time, and how you're looking at your time comprehensively. You'll notice this isn't about your resources, your priorities. It's just about the math, which takes all of the emotion off the table. If you want a primer on what is now, near, and future time, A, you can go back and watch this YouTube video because it's going to be live on Thursday, or B, we have an article that I wrote a couple of months ago about this very topic that we're going to drop into the chat that you can use as a resource, just as a reminder. So you go in and you have a conversation about this concept of now, near, and future time with your boss. And your first question should be, what do you think my numbers should be? Because here's red flag number one. If your numbers and their numbers are not on the same page, the same way mine was with my my direct report, then you have a problem. Because what I wanted his numbers to be and what his numbers were in two different places. Now, for him, it was a fairly positive conversation. But Dawn, I'm guessing if your boss comes back and says 100-0-0, which I doubt, then my guess is you need to have a little bit of a conversation. So you have a conversation, say, like, what do you think my numbers should be? Then you can have a conversation and say, look, this is in reality what they are. And then you say, what do you actually think? Like, we've got to find a place more than likely in the middle and actually come back with, this is what I think they should be. So in Dawn, in your case, the 70-10-20, then you can have a conversation around how do you start to shift those numbers. So if you think about a 40-hour week and 10 and 20% of your time, that's basically saying that one day a week you are focusing, and it doesn't have to be the full day, but one day a week you are focusing on future time. And so having a conversation with your manager and saying, look, I think a really great idea would be for Fridays to be future days. So today I'm doing XYZ on Fridays, as an example. Are we good with me either not doing them, having somebody else do them, although we should have an hour and future conversation with them too, or actually building out new resources? Now, for those of you who are in leadership roles and you're looking at this and you're like, this is a really interesting conversation. There is nothing stopping you having a conversation with you and your whole team, because here's the other big tip that I'm going to give you with this. These data points talking about now, near, and future in aggregate for a team are an unbelievably useful tool to be able to take to your boss when you need to have a conversation about resources. They're a fantastic conversation to have if you report directly into the CFO, who's usually the one with the budget, around how are you thinking about budgeting. And especially if you are resource constrained or growing with an organization, this takes the we can't do it all conversation and puts mathematics behind it so that you can think about where you want to take your team and how it is you want to grow. So this is probably this now, near, and future contract, the most powerful tool that I used in helping a really fast scaling team not get burned out at the end of the day. Because organizations will always ask for more and will not be so good if they're coming back and saying, you're just saying no to them, we can't do it, we don't have enough resources. Enough resources is not an answer. This then starts to allow you to say, look, how do you factor in now, near, and future time for your mental health, for your physical health, for all of the things? Because I come back to, if they're just looking, future time on your physical and mental health is a critical piece as you're navigating through. And it's a really great way of not only doing this for yourself professionally, but also doing it for yourself personally. So I challenge you all to go through the exercise and figure out what your numbers are, and then start thinking about how do you think about what your numbers should be, and how do you lean towards that. So that is my tip for the day. But I want you to hear from Annie and some of her ideas. So I mentioned earlier in the conversation that Annie is part of my Selfish Squad. We met, I don't even want to think about how many years ago. And you will find out that she and I are very different people, but are equally curious and ambitious for each other. We actually spend several hours every couple of weeks out on hiking trails, sharing ideas. I would actually describe our hikes as kind of epic future time, because we're always bouncing ideas off each other. And if I was to talk about what is Annie's magic, she is part synthesizer, part humanizer, and part transformer, and does that as the COO of a mixed reality technology company in the Bay Area. And I am very grateful to call her friend. So, Annie, I'm going to talk about our hike the other day. Have we got you on mic so we can talk about that? I was preparing for this event, and Annie, you shared with me how you have been going through a bit of a rough period recently. And I said, oh, can we share your story with the people? You want to go ahead, I'm going to hand it over to you. Would you want to tell them what was going on and why we started talking about this very topic?
Sure, but first, Joanna, I'm a little upset with you because you didn't talk to me about now, near, and future time, which I just had this epiphany sitting here listening to you talk about now, near, and future time, and that's what my issue was. So I'm glad I came today. Yeah, we always talk about what's going on. We talk about careers, we experiment with different ideas and things like that. And I have definitely been feeling burnt out, which manifested in things like not sleeping well, having nightmares, which I don't normally have, but nightmares that not only would wake me up, but would wake my husband up. And being kind of cranky at work, which I'm usually not cranky because I have an amazing team. They're fantastic. I love my job most days. And I realized that I was not my best self for some reason. And now I know why, because we're in a very busy time at work. I've lost some resources. As the COO of a very small company, I get shit done pretty much. Like there's a lot that I do that's just getting shit done. But I'm also expected to think about the future. We have a lot of really interesting things coming up in the pipeline. And so as Joanna knows, I take Fridays off. I negotiated this into my package. It's my creative day. It's my not thinking about work day. And I realize now it's my future time, which I hadn't really thought of it that way before. But during the pandemic, operationally moving to remote, trying to navigate all the different rules in different counties, getting work done when we are a hardware company and people need to be actually in the office was added to my get shit done list. And so I hadn't been taking Fridays off. My workload increased, my support decreased, and I hadn't had a vacation in a couple of years. And so all of these things came together and I realized that I was burnt out. And so I took a few days off and I did something that I don't normally do because I don't know if any of you are at a startup, but if you are and you take time off, you feel like, oh, I still need to check email. I still need to like respond to any fires. And I told my CEO, who is fantastic, I said, I'm not checking email. And I put one of those out of office vacation responders in. Usually I say, if you need something, text me or reach out to this person. I just said, I'll get back to you on Monday. I didn't say I'll get back to you anytime before then. I said, I'm not checking email. And I really needed that. And it was really rejuvenating to get out in nature, hike with Joanna, hike with my mom, and not think about work. So I think one of the key things for me with respect to burnout is taking the time off that you need. And over the last year, it's been really, really hard for a lot of people. So giving yourself that mental space. But during that time, I also started thinking about why was I reacting differently to having so much work? And what could I do about it? And I read things like Stoic Daily to kind of work on mindset issues. And one thing I noticed, you get these inputs from different parts of your life. There was something about mindset that I read in that book. My mom was trying to develop a habit and wanted me to find an app to help her develop a habit. And so when I did that, I thought, oh, I need to develop some habits too. And so one of the things that I tried to do, which I now realize was really creating more future time for myself, was I set a habit. So I'd be reminded on my watch, which lives with me, every day at 5:15 to sit for 15 minutes and not look at anything, not do anything, just sit. And I've done some meditation in the past, and I consider this like opposite meditation, where I would let thoughts come into my head, but instead of letting them float down the river on a leaf or whatever to get out of my head, I engage with them. So I was like this curious investigator, or I was a friend asking questions like, why did you do that? Why did you react that way? What makes you feel like that? And I would follow it until, honestly, I got all the way back to my childhood. Like, oh, I remember my dad coming down on me on this, and maybe that ties into it. And I started doing this every day, just for 15 minutes. It's not a lot of time. And I realized a lot about myself, and I found that just taking 15 minutes of no demands from anyone else brought my stress level down. Like I just felt better. Had ideas that were new to me. And it just gave me that mental space to rejuvenate. So that was one thing that I did. The other was I felt like I was reacting when like all these demands were coming to me, and I was just getting upset and not happy to help. I was irritated that there was yet another thing that was being added to my to-do list. And I realized that part of that was I was feeling like I had to respond immediately. And I was thinking about, oh, well, what will they think if I don't get this done now? Or I was way too worried about what other people were thinking or whether they would get things immediately. And so I was telling Joanna that I had this, when the Apple Watch first came out with the heart rate information, I wanted to use it as a meditation tool so that whenever, you know, when your blood boils and someone's getting you upset and you feel it, you're like in the moment, you're upset. There's an anatomical physiological reaction to that, and it manifests in your heart rate. So I thought, wouldn't it be great if you could hit it, you could set it a level that if it went above that, your watch would buzz and it would be a reminder of, oh, okay, I'm in that moment. I need to calm down, take a breath, and then react. Excuse me. I couldn't find that functionality, so I've never been able to use it for that. But what I did instead was I thought, instead of an in the moment reactive reminder, I would try to build a habit. So using the same habit, I think it's called habit tracker software, I set a reminder every 2 hours that would pop up with a phrase that puts a smile on my face. So it kind of takes me out of any anger or frustration I'm in the moment. And also reminds me to think about, like, does this really matter? Can you let go of this? Is this important? And I've done this now for about a week. And I'm finding that I'm building a habit. Who knew that you could actually build habits with Habit Tracker? I am much more calm. I'm much more able to now think about that in the moment, not just when my reminder goes off every 2 hours. And so I would encourage you to look at things like that, like knowing yourself. What helps you reclaim more of your time, reclaim more of your mental space, so that the day-to-day get shit done list doesn't overwhelm you, or whatever it is that might be burning you out doesn't overwhelm you. So I just talked a lot. I'll shut up and let Joanna yell at me or something.
No. See, guys, I don't just yell at you guys. I yell at my selfish squad too. No, I just, part of why I wanted you to come on and share those was thank you for sharing your story of the nightmares and what have you. And I'm really glad that they are diminished.
They are.
But I think, you all know that I think life is a bespoke experience, and we all need different tools and different ways of doing things. And so the Joanna path for helping you deal with stress is not always the right one for you, and figuring out what it is. And what I love about what you shared is, God, sitting for 15 minutes and just thinking is, as you well know, not something that I am very good at. I have other strengths and strategies. I use math, as you know. So really helping through. If you have questions for Annie, stick around, because when we move into the Q&A session, I'm sure she would be happy to answer them, which is what I want to do. So let me pop us forward real quick to remind you that next week is one of our standard, they are never quite standard, future you shows. And so if you want to come, I will be doing some of my famous transformations. If you have never seen one before or think somebody should get an introduction, have them come along, because it is going to be there. And then if you're like, that's awesome that Annie has a tool, or I want to have other tools to kind of help me through this, I want to remind you all, we have a text coaching product, which Kelly's going to be dropping a link into the chat and will be in the show notes, where you can have a little mini Joanna on your shoulder a couple of times a week, just asking you questions, helping you think. If you want to do an investment in either the confident you or the future you, it's a really easy way of just saying, look, if I get a text a couple of times a week from Joanna, then I've got things as usual. I'm always about a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of sparkle, and a lot of activity on how you do things, but it's a really low dosage way to help you start exploring the future you. That at best, like in my challenge for this week, I want you to go out and figure out what your numbers are. I think it looks like Annie's going to do that for sure. But figure out what your numbers are, because just understanding like where you are and where is it you need to be is a really good first step. And then if you're feeling a little extra brave, have the conversation with your boss, because they are buying a subscription to the future you. Which means you actually get to choose what product you want to sell them. And if you are letting them decide your numbers for you, then you are not actually, they are just telling you what to do as opposed to selling the subscription to the future you. So something to really think about. So that is the show for this week. I am going to hand over the reins to Kelly and let you go to Magic Time and our transformation or Q&A.
Well, first we have our winner for the day. And today's winner is Kimber Tate. Woohoo! So you'll get a free one-on-one session with Joanna.
Nice to see you again, Kimber. We're going to be reaching out with information on how to schedule your one-on-one session with me. Come prepared with an open mind, because ultimately, we're here to help you figure out how to teach other people who the future you is, so that you can be you in the future. Because the clearer you are about who you are, what you want, and teach other people why that's awesome, the more likely you get to be you. I know, it's a bit of a circle. I'm Joanna, your potentialist and fairy godmother, and I wish you the very best. Thanks for coming.